Welcome to Read Poems Every Day. Today we're going to keep getting to know Rita Dove's poem Pomade. Pomade? Pomade. Pomade. And continue to pronounce it differently every time I say the word. Apparently, not a word I use very often. I haven't tried pomade yet, which might have been how it was pronounced in O Brother, Where Art Thou, but now I can't remember. Pomade is what I'm going to try to say. Okay, so we're going to keep getting to know pomade. In the last video we got through bean counting. Um, I think I struggled a little bit to say much of any interest after doing that bean counting. Not that I minded doing that, but I do think just alone from tracking enjambment, pronouns, punctuation, it was a little difficult to really get a sense of the poem beyond what appears to be a bit of a rhythmical shift into the final third of the poem, where enjambment becomes actually enjambment's pretty frequent throughout the poem, but a higher frequency of periods um, in the later part of the poem, and more caesura, so a lot more pausing that's happening midline as you work through the final third of the poem. Enjambment, for the most part, is frequent throughout. So the frequency of punctuated pauses at the ends of lines, there doesn't really appear to be much of a pattern there. Okay. So that to some degree might inform some questions we might ask about form when we get there. But before we get there, I thought we might listen for sound and sense a little bit. And to do that, I might just reread the first stanza. I'm not going to reread the whole poem, but just to get some of its sound system interfacing with myself a little bit, since it's been a couple days since I've looked at this poem. So this is the first stanza. She sweeps the kitchen floor of the riverbed her husband saw fit to bring home with his catfish, recalling a flower, very straight, with a spiked collar arching under a crown of bright, fluffy worms she had gathered in armfuls along a still road in Tennessee. Even then, he was forever off in the woods somewhere in search of a magic creek. So just a few moments here that stood out to me. Um, the end of line 2, catfish, recalling, is just a sort of really good, sonically pleasing lines. Catfish recalling. Make that a little bigger. Okay, catfish recalling. Spiked collar. Realizing now I'm probably going to have to. Okay, no, we're good. Bright fluffy worms, with a spiked collar arching under a crown of bright fluffy worms. Here so far, I guess it's the hard K sounds here. Catfish, recalling, spiked collar, crown. That's sort of catching my ear here. And we got the sort of forever off, forever off. So again, these smaller kind of repetitions that nevertheless I find quite nice. Okay. Magic Creek. Also, a lot of hard K sounds compressed into just those two words. A lot, three of them. Was Willema shushed the pack of dusty children. Great line. Again, I think you have sort of throughout these nice sort of phrases that cluster together consonant sounds. You don't have like the long sort of triple, quadruple, quintuple repetition of a consonant sound like you get in poems by say Hopkins or something. But window in the door, that's a nice cut out magazine. Cloud, there's the hard K again. Oil. Pears and nuts and rotting furs, some nice repetition of the and there, closing down the second stanza. One thing I forgot noticing here, the cut out magazine cloud taped to the pane. Some nice sort of threading together of the K and T sounds there. Cut out magazine cloud taped to, right? So you have a lot of that alliteration. Some alliteration of the C, the K like C sounds, the hard K sounds there with the T sounds mixed in. Okay. Of course, bee balm is all by itself sort of a very pleasing word. Sky, sweet, merciless. Sweet and merciless. Okay. All right. So a lot of the kind of sonic pleasure of this poem does seem kind of anchored in things like assonance, alliteration. It's not overly emphasized, it's not exaggerated, but it is just pleasant and pleasing to sort of catch the way these um, sounds cluster together these words and phrases, but not a ton of repetition, really, with the repeated imagery of worms. But that's more a question about form for me than it is about sound. Um, okay, so maybe I will kind of just leave it there then. What's the prose sense? What's going on here with the prose sense? I was trying to inch my way toward this in the previous video, but was having a little difficulty. In stanza one, present moment, husband's return with catfish for dinner, maybe. Beulah sweeping up the mess, remembers a flower, and Tennessee. So remembers presumably a different place. The whole collection, Thomas and Beulah, kind of tracks the migration of Thomas of these two characters, their meeting, but also their life. So these are sort of episodes in the life of their uh, relationship with each other and their own individual development. So stanza one, yeah, we have kind of then a sense of the present moment and memory. Willema introduced as figure from the past, stand in, in a way, for for Thomas. Thomas is named later in the poem. I think we also learn later that Willemma is Thomas's sister, who presumably lives with or near them in Tennessee here. It was Willemma shushed the pack of dusty children. I think it's important that at the very end of stanza one, you get the sense that then, just like now, Thomas is often gone, and that then brings to mind this other figure, the sort of the co-parent she had at the time, Willemma. Figure it past anyway. Taking charge of children and teaching Beulah things. Hmm. Stanza 3. Hmm. Description of various, should we say objects? Objects before ellipses, and a return, and Willemma. Willemma too. So you have the cabin. The cabin leans straight away to the south. Hmm. Draws a vector from cabin to the colored cemetery down in War Trace. You have the barley soup, cornbread, iron pan, cast iron pan. This brings back a specific memory of Willemma's long walk for tape. And a memory, Thomas, asking something of her. Are those two memories related? It's unclear. Is Thomas, what does it mean to get out? Right, what does it mean to get out while she was still fit? Hmm. So as a way to illustrate her fitness, that she could walk 10 miles round trip just for tape, indicating her fitness. Thomas asking that she get out more, not just to get tape, presumably more than that. And if it's more than that, it does kind of reflect back on the image of her with this cutout magazine cloud. Hmm. Bringing some of the outdoors inside, so to speak, in stanza 2. Okay, stanza 4. Sense memory and connection between Willemma's in placeness, not getting out, and the strange association Beulah makes between her and travel. It's something that poetry does so beautifully when it captures a person. It doesn't just, as narratives do, as biographies try to do, give you as some biographies do, try to, sorry, this is very ungenerous and thumbnail sketch of biography as a genre that most biographers, of course, deviate from. It's not just a kind of pile of facts arranged into a narrative, um, as if the best way to know a person is to track events of their life across their whole life. But instead, what lyric poetry can do, verse poetry, is give you the sort of sense of a person. And sometimes that sense can come through these somewhat jarring juxtapositions of, what did Willema feel like to Beulah? She felt like wisdom. And what does wisdom feel like? It feels like travel. It feels like, you know, it feels like the heft of a person who has seen things, right, and been places, and whose life has been fed by experience, right? Except the sort of paradox of Willema is that all those years in Tennessee, she stayed in place, even walking 10 miles for tape. Hmm. So we get that sense of her there, strange association, also an account of the near end of her life, faced with and captured with a kind of matter of factness. Reverend, not doctor. Note that Willema, the memory here, and one wonders who is she, who remembers this? Um, because she doesn't say this to Beulah, to a passerby who's not named. But even so, what appears to be sort of signaled here is that this what is the state of mind of someone who, having fallen on the floor, asks for a reverend and not for a doctor, right? Someone who's hmm, accepting in a kind of matter of fact way that this is where it stops. Right? Then in stanza 5, we're back at the beginning. Beulah, who's named for the first time in the poem, though not the first time in the collection, though the version we're reading here was the version published in Poetry Magazine. I think a few years before the whole collection was published. We're back at the beginning, at the present, rather, um, in a way, with this sort of Gibbs train of thought, right? The sense that Beulah in the present moment is cleaning up all the mess her husband's made coming home with catfish. And this triggers a rush of memories. The flower, her husband's absence, the sort of compensating presence of her sister-in-law, Willema, the things Willema taught her, Willema's place, and the kind of the broader sort of scene of what it meant to live in that cabin in Tennessee. And then the interesting character sketch that comes through in stanzas 2, 3, 4, and 4. And then in stanza 5, boom, we're back to the present moment, to the situation that was the occasion for this train of memory. Hmm. Some descriptions of what's around her, right? We get the linoleum, but then what's around her, but also what isn't. She conjures the webbed loam beneath the floor, right? Beneath the floor, which is associated with the floor on which Willema may have died, right? So you get the floor, the loam, hair, palms, countertop, fish. You get the reference to Oriental gentleman, which is somewhat strange. I wonder what that means, or if there's other kind of Orientalist imagery through Thomas and Beulah, or through some of the poetry in and around Rita Dove at this time. The last two lines, line and a half, offer hmm, kind of truism or lesson. Nothing ever stops. And to turn. The speaker draws back to capture how Beulah feels now. Hmm. Which is, again, one amazing thing a poem can do is sort of begin somewhere, work through a whole mess of stuff, and then come out the other side, feeding all of that stuff back through the point where we started. And the speaker, or the primary figure the speaker is talking about, has in some sense changed. Maybe not dramatically, but is feeling something, or a feeling is being registered that wasn't necessarily conscious at the beginning. She feels herself slowly rolling down the sides of the earth. What a great, also sonically, feels herself slowly rolling. There's the L's of feel herself slowly rolling down the sides of the earth. So we have suddenly this scaling out to the earth that we don't really have earlier in the poem. Every other place is hmm, quite located, though you do have this reference to Turkey, to thinking about these towers that you would see along the skyline, uh, not in Tennessee, presumably. Uh, so there is a kind of scaling out there where suddenly the feeling starts to feel more global in scope. What does it mean to be feeling this way after all of this stuff? And what's its relationship to this? Nothing ever stops. I was talking with, and maybe this is the last thing I'll say, and then we'll wrap up today. Um, and I think since I put so much time already into this poem, we'll keep going. We'll keep going with Pomade. I was talking with someone yesterday who had recently lost someone who had recently lost his mother, and we were talking a little bit about part of the uncanny feeling. I don't know if uncanny is the right word, but one of the strangest feelings that settle in after you've lost someone as important as a parent. And this can feel all kinds of ways to you. It can feel heartbreaking. It can feel frustrating. It can feel angry making. Um, what am I getting at? The feeling that the world just keeps going. The earth just keeps spinning. The hours keep passing. I remember this after my dad died. We were all sitting in the room where he had died, and the funeral home folks had come to fetch the body, and I was just sitting there with the family, and we realized, well, we should probably eat lunch. And it was not this high dramatic moment, but what strikes me is just how normal that is. The worst thing that's ever happened to you happens, and you still have to eat lunch. I'm not necessarily saying that's exactly what the poem's getting after, but the line is doing what poems sometimes do. They kick stuff up for the reader. that helps you kind of reckon with and translate the insight into your own tongue. And maybe there is something about that here. That one day Willema was just gone, and that time was some time ago. And that was a different floor, and this is the floor now, and that ground is still here. Nothing ever stops. Anyway, let's think more about that in a future video. Maybe I'm off base. Maybe as I have a few more thinks about the poem, uh, we'll push that a little further, especially next time when we think about the poem's form and its figurative language, if there is any sort of standout uses, figuration here. Well, thanks for spending more time with me and Rita Dove. And hey, let's read more poems tomorrow.